Hey gang, today we're in New Haven, Connecticut at Evergreen Cemetery. Very, very historic place here. You're gonna love this tour. But on the tour, we're gonna tell the very tragic story of the death, the murder of one young Jennie Cramer that happened right here in New Haven. So let's take a walk and I'll tell you the story. The sad story of poor Jennie Cramer. Happened back in 1881, and to put a time frame on that, you know I love the frontier history, World War II, but the reference I make, this was just under 3 months before the shootout at the OK Corral, where she lost her life. Now, before we get into the story, just happened to be near a very interesting grave, a family plot here. If you've heard of the Winchester repeating rifle, speaking of the Old West, this is the family plot for just some of the Winchesters. I saw other Winchesters here. But we want to talk just a little bit about Sarah. Sarah Winchester, after her husband died, well, the rumor, even while she was still alive, it was said that she was a little bit obsessed with the mansion, which is subsequently turned into a tourist stop museum. It was said, the rumor, when she was an older woman, that it was the curse, or she felt guilt from a curse of some kind, that all of these rifles were killing so many people, and the souls of those people were going to come and haunt her, and maybe did. But probably just a rumor, legend. I think what really propagated this, perpetuated it, was these people that bought the mansion after she died, and they wanted to turn it into a tourist destination. So they really inflated the story. The story goes also, that mansion, that what she did was she was in a constant state of construction with the mansion because she felt that would keep the ghosts away, I guess. And if you go there today, you will see she was constantly working on it. And there are really strange things. There are hallways that go all around. There are doors that open to blank walls, stairways that go nowhere. But probably just a legend. Interesting though. You can go check it out. So let's take this walk here. So Jennie, let's talk about poor Jennie. Jennie Cramer was born here in the spring of 1860 here in New Haven, Connecticut. She was one of 3 children. Her father was Jacob, her mother Christina, and they owned a local cigar store here in town. Now, she was the center of attention. As a young child, like many children, she didn't have to work. She was primped and pedicured, kind of a spoiled child. And they said she was very, very attractive, and she was. And of course, that would attract the attention of many men. She was referred to as the Belle of New Haven. Now, when she became a teenager, she started to go out at night. She liked to party. And she just loved the attention of the men. One of those men that wanted her was a guy named James Malley Jr. He was 23 years old. He was older. But he was smitten with her. I should say he was obsessed with her. He was the nephew of a very wealthy man here in town. In fact, this guy was the richest guy in town, Mr. Edward Malley, the owner of the big dry goods store here. The Malley dry goods store was right across the street from the Cramer cigar shop. So James would always be over pestering Jennie. He'd write her love notes, and he would have them delivered to the cigar shop. But the affection was not returned. She didn't really like him. As a friend, maybe. But he was obsessed. He would try to get her to go on walks with him. And this was kind of the common thing in the day. This is how you would you would try to court a woman. You'd go on walks with them and talk to them and try to woo them. So he was just a pain in the butt. She did go on some walks with him. She was being courteous, and he was a fun guy to go out with, to go out to all the various entertainment spots that were in town. Now, on these walks, she would always insist that they not be alone. So James was kind of forced to bring somebody, so he would bring his cousin. His name was Walter. Walter Malley, this was the son of the owner of the dry goods store. And there was another woman who came into the mix, actually the fiancée of Walter. Her name was Blanche Douglas. Blanche Douglas. And she would come into play on this story, and she would accompany them on these walks. So it was a threesome. It was a threesome. What would they talk about? You have to wonder. Well, on July 23rd, 1881, Jennie decided that it was time for a walk with the threesome, and they went. She did not return home until early in the morning. Uh-oh. What's going on? Jennie's mom was really upset. She said that it was not her fault. She could not get home from the Malley mansion because she couldn't find an escort. And that was that. But less than 2 weeks later, on August 3rd, Jennie went out again. And again, the same kind of thing. She did not return. This time when she did come back, she was with Blanche. And she had said that the whole time she was with her, with Jennie, protecting her, but unfortunately they had to seek shelter in a woman's lodging house. Now her mom was relieved, but she was thinking, this sounds kind of strange. I'm kind of wondering about this Blanche woman, Blanche Douglas. So she sat Jennie down and she said, look, I'm not happy with your behavior. You are really setting a bad example for your sister here. And you really need to shape up. Shape up or ship out. She threatened to throw her out of the house. But when she left the room and when she came back, there was Jennie and Blanche. And when she left and came back again, there wasn't Jennie and Blanche. They were gone. And this time they did not come back. Because 2 days later, early in the morning on August 6th, an oyster fisherman, he was getting his boat ready when he looked over and he saw something lying in the shallows against the ripples. It was the body of a young woman. So he waded in and he brought her in to the sandy shore. And he called police. At first, he said, I thought she may have drowned, but people then took off with the story and they said, well, she probably committed suicide. Maybe she was pregnant, which in the day when this happened a lot, of course, women would panic. And some would, in fact, commit suicide. But an autopsy determined that she had no water in her lungs. She didn't drown, and a closer examination determined that she had been attacked and, in fact, was sexually assaulted. Then witnesses started coming forward that they had seen this young lady the evening before on August 5th, and she was with a man with a mustache, a man who looked like James. And of course this led to the infamous threesome. The Malley boys and Miss Blanche Douglas. So the three were brought in and they were questioned by police. The interrogation went on, but they said they had not seen her since 3 days before. Now, when the rich uncle and father, Edward, came back in town, he heard what was happening. Oh boy, he jumped into action. He hired, with all that money, the best private detective money could buy, and a lawyer like none other. There was word being passed around that witnesses, people were being paid off. No surprise. Keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. Now all of a sudden witnesses could not remember. They couldn't remember much. Well, there was an inquest, and Blanche Douglas told the authorities how she had been with Jennie and the men on August 3rd at the Malley mansion, and she said she wasn't feeling well, so she stayed in the same room with Jennie. Now, once Blanche was finished talking, she immediately left, and all of a sudden, the next thing you know, she's headed back to New York. This aroused police suspicions. Now, why would she do that? That usually means something. So they went to track her down to further the questioning, and it turns out that she had given them a fake address. She actually lived and worked there in a brothel. That's where they found her, and now she started to talk. She said that she had met the two men when they had come there to visit the brothel. They were kind of customers, and that her name was not actually Blanche Douglas. Her real name was Anna Kearns. Anna Kearns. And it was Walter. Walter invited her to come to the mansion in New Haven, and it was there that she met Jennie, and of course James. And it was now that Blanche decided to tell the police much more, everything actually that she knew. On the evening that Jennie did not come home until the morning, they had been actually at a restaurant. They had also had rooms of lodging. Blanche had gone to a room with Walter, her fiance, while James was pestering and persuading Jennie, come up to my room. Things were not going smooth that night, but finally she went up with him just to get him to stop. And then all of a sudden, Blanche said she could hear through the walls Jennie screaming, don't, don't. Then on the second evening, August 3rd, the second time they were all together again, but this time it was at the Malley mansion. And they had been drinking a lot. Dad was out of town, nobody around. They had the mansion all to themselves. And the same routine happened. Blanche and Walter go upstairs, and James is pestering Jennie. This time she wouldn't go. She knew what was coming. Then Blanche said she heard her scream. And then she screamed some more. Shrill screams, murderous screams. Then she said, when they woke up, she just got out of there. She said that the rich father, his brother, offered her money to buy her a ticket to go back to New York, actually to go back all the way to Europe immediately until this whole affair had ended. So she was arrested and charged with perjury. And about this time, the test came back that Jennie's body had arsenic poisoning, and they determined that there was a lot of arsenic in her organs, a lot. Not just trace amounts that you might see in the day. Women would apply it to their face. It was a common thing to some extent to help improve their appearance. On August 5th, both James and Walter Malley were arrested for murder. And interestingly, while in jail, Walter Malley composed a score, a little music there while you're in jail. It was called Under the Elm. Now, of course, the word was going out on this sensational affair, this scandal, this murder of the belle. It was a waltz, actually, and it actually became famous. I should say probably infamous. So the trial was set. They're going to trial now. And during the same year, it was April 25th, all three were charged at the same time. They actually exhumed Jennie's body, of course, buried here. They came here to dig her up. This was because, unsurprisingly, the defense tried to claim that the arsenic poisoning was caused by Jennie, applying it to her face. It's her fault. This is why it happened. Now, after all the decomposition, of course, there was no embalming done. Not that much arsenic was found this time, conveniently. Newspapers were in a frenzy. They were trying to figure out what was going to happen. Were they guilty, or was it Jennie? Did Jennie self-inflict? They actually sold booklets on this story, if you can believe it. They sold booklets. Now, of course, the three defendants claimed not guilty because nobody's ever guilty. Witnesses did come forward to refute them and say that they had been with Jennie that evening, the evening of question before the body was found. Well, the defense played all the tactical tricks that they usually do. The suicide thing. And what happened? Well, the jury came back and they decided that the threesome was not guilty. The case was largely circumstantial. We cannot convict. No direct evidence that James had given the arsenic to Jennie. If she did have too much arsenic, well, this was obviously a huge miscarriage of justice, and the guilty were set free. And you can imagine a lot of that had to do with money. Still happens today, guys. Money talks. People listen. They were bribed. Now get this. Of all things, what does the family do? They hold a huge party. And of course the newspapers, they reported on it and they were scorned for that. But they actually had a huge party and they were gleeful and celebrating. And on the other side of the tracks, it was just, I think the same year, Jennie's mom passed away from heartbreak. So, absolutely devastating.
Really made it, I think crumpets are that's great, she's had her own to
Justice was not carried out, and these three got away. Well, I should say, you have the people that were conspiring, not to plan, but, you know, they were part of it. They didn't go in and help Jennie, but you have James, who definitely killed her. And how does she just get to the beach magically that night, right? Big Mr. Malley, big businessman, big rich guy. Another injustice, that business, that huge company, it didn't close until 100 years later. It thrived. It did even better. Actually didn't close until 1980. But I wonder, when you go to companies and they put the pictures up, you know, 100 years old, we're 200 years old. And then they have the antique, you know, the vintage pictures and the story, right? I wonder if they have this story, and I wonder if they have pictures of their party. Or I should say had, they're not in business anymore. I'll bet they didn't. Well, we have arrived at the grave right on the road here of Jennie Cramer. Now what's nice is she was unmarked for a, well, you have to wonder, I mean, she had to have had a gravestone, probably a gravestone similar to this, that probably ended up like this. I'm going to take this flag and put it in my pocket, and you're supposed to dispose of them properly. But I bet her stone probably ended up like this. And again, looks to be a child, because when you see the sheep. And I'll bet it was like this, and it ended up like this, and it crumbled away. No, you know what? It didn't end. It probably crumbled away because the lucky ones got buried like this in the 20th century. But someone was nice enough to get her a beautiful granite stone. So hats off to you, whoever did this. And I think it was just this last year. All right, well, let's drop a rose for the belle of New Haven. And we bid farewell to poor Jennie Cramer. Rest in peace.